From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. Hope everyone is ready for a great show today. We've really got a lot packed into this morning's show and a lot to talk about. Today's show is supported by our friends over at Nudge Security. You'll hear a little bit from them. You'll hear a little bit more from them in just a little bit in the show. So I want to preface this morning's show before I kick off, before we do coffee cup cheers, before anything else. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend the Teammate CISO Village. And if you're a Chief Information Security Officer and you're not part of the Teammate CISO Village, you're really missing out. The Teammate team always puts on great, amazing content, but they've also got really, really smart speakers. Deborah Wheeler, the CISO for Delta, spoke yesterday. Charles Bonner, who's the operating partner, but also the former CISO at Citi, really the understudy of the late Steve Katz, the first CISO ever, spoke. And Mike Rogers, who, if you don't know who Mike Rogers is and you're in cybersecurity, you live under a rock. Mike Rogers was the former director of the NSA. He has got a world famous testimony to Congress that y'all can go and look up on YouTube. Admiral Rogers is a great patriot, a very, very smart man. He served under President Obama and the first Trump administration as the NSA director before before retiring and being replaced by General Nakasone. So I get to that because yesterday, as he was speaking, he said something that he used to say to every single president. And I keep thinking we're on episode like 800. What episode are we on? 873 of the show. And I've never been able to articulate it in 4 or 5 words the way Admiral Rogers did. And those words are cyber happens in the context. So I want that to be a word of reflection because realistically, when we talk about the news, when we talk about these various vulnerabilities or types of attacks, and we're going to talk about that today, I want those words to reflect in your mind. Because imagine if we went to our CEOs or to our board and we said, cyber happens in the context. And now let's figure out what that context is, because that helps us understand what's happening. So just going to preface the show with that. Good morning. Let's do our coffee cup cheers. I've got my double espresso coffee cup cheers, y'all. Love it. Lavazza. Thank you so much. I know you're not sponsoring the show. I've begged. I've whined. I've asked. Nothing, but we'll see. All right. Let's get into some 0 days. This one specifically coming from Broadcom, releasing a security alert warning VMware customers about 3 exploited 0 days in the wild. Those CVEs are 2025, 22, 224, 22, 225, and 22226. And they all impact VMware ESXi Workstation and Fusion. Patches have been released and workarounds are not available. So CVE 22224 is described as a critical VMCI heap overflow vulnerability that affects VMware ESXi Workstation. ESXi and Workstation would allow an attacker with local admin privileges on the VM to execute code as the virtual machine VMX process running on the host. VMware ESXi's 22225 is a high-severity arbitrary file write issue that allows an attacker with privilege within the VMX process to trigger an arbitrary kernel writing, leading to an escape of the sandbox. And again, all these are being actively exploited in the wild. And finally, 22226 affects ESXi Workstation and Fusion. It's a high-severity information disclosure flaw caused by an out-of-bounds read bug in the HGFS component, which would allow an attacker who has admin privileges to a VM to leak memory from the VMX process. As this article is being written, there's no workarounds but the patches. So you want to make sure you prioritize these patches. Can't stress it enough. Prioritizing these patches is critical. So you want to make sure you do that. We'll move on to Rubrik disclosing that last month, one of its servers that was hosting log files was breached. It caused the company to begin the rotation of potentially leaked authentication keys that were in those log files. Rubrik is a cybersecurity company that specializes in data protection, backup, and recovery. It's got 3,000 employees and more than 22 global offices. The company says they have around 6,000 customers worldwide, including some really big Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. In the security advisory that was published last month and first spotted by Kevin Bauman, Rubrik says it detected unusual activity on a server hosting their log files. The security team discovered anomalous activity on a server that contained log files. They promptly took the server offline to mitigate the risk. However, Rubrik says that a small number of those log files contain access information, causing the company to rotate the keys out of an abundance of caution. They're saying there's no information misuse. Now, last week I was at NHI Summit at NASDAQ. We talked about key rotation. And again, managing and rotating your keys and making sure your keys are never static keys and they're constantly getting rotated is very, very basic hygiene, especially as we get in a hyper development speed like we are now. And so the idea that this happens and that the keys are solid and require rotation because of that is something extremely significant and something that deserves attention. There are ways to do this, by the way, plenty of ways to actually manage your keys and rotate them without having to go through a whole event. You just have to find the right partners to manage and rotate those keys. Oded Havron, the CEO of Aquilas, said yesterday at the CISO Village, he goes, the future of keys is secretless. And I believe him, where you're just generating a key. It's temporary. It works for that one time. And then it's constantly generating additional and additional and additional and additional and additional keys. And so there's never a static key, meaning there's never an opportunity for someone to abuse your environment. How we get there, computing, there's a whole bunch of stuff around this that still needs to be kind of identified, disclosed, discussed. Does this work everywhere, legacy and whatnot? Good conversation, but he thinks that's the future. I'd be interested to see if that's the case as well. Vulnerability chip maker Qualcomm and MediaTek on Monday are announcing patches for many vulnerabilities, including 5 issues that were resolved with the latest Android fixes. The security bulletin details 14 security defects impacting proprietary software used in tens of chipsets models, including 7 issues that are rated critical severity. All critical flaws are described as memory corruption issues. So those are there. 3 CVEs were named. That were also addressed with the March 2025 Android update, since they use Qualcomm as well. And MediaTek, for their end, on Monday published 10 vulnerabilities affecting dozens of chipsets. Fixes were released for 3 high-severity issues, including a memory corruption in modems that could lead to a denial of service, 2 out-of-bounds write bugs in the key install, and a WLAN that could lead to the escalation of privileges. So those have all been patched. Before we continue this morning's show, the show would not be possible without the support of our partners. Here's a message from one of our supporters, Nudge Security. Hey, security gang. I'm so happy to welcome back Nudge Security to the show. And let's talk a little bit about identity risks, data security risks, and third-party risks, and what do they all have in common. They're made a whole lot worse by SaaS sprawl. Every new SaaS account adds a new identity to secure a new place where sensitive data could end up and a new vendor risk management assessment you need to complete. Nudge Security addresses those risks at the source, helping you to protect and manage all of your apps, identities, and data anywhere and everywhere where it can happen. It all starts with discovery. Within minutes of starting your free trial, you'll have a full inventory of every SaaS account ever created by anyone in your org, along with insights into authentication methods, app-to-app integrations, vendor risk insights, and more. My team and I did this last summer. It was absolutely mind-boggling what we found. It helped us really kind of put a plan together and start a method of trying to automate security and governance tasks like detecting risks and misconfiguration. It helped us conduct user access reviews and help us offboard employees from specific apps that we didn't even know existed. It freed up our time for a lot more strategic work and vendor security profiles for every app, even Gen AI tools. It helped us do all of that, and it automated it, which I'm a big fan of. Nudge Security is graciously offering everyone a free 14-day trial by going to nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. That's nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. The link is in the show notes as well. Go get your free 14-day trial now. All right, let's keep going on today's show. Russians had their internet disrupted on Monday due to a targeted DDoS attack on the Russian telecom provider Beeline. That's the second major attack on Moscow-based companies in recent weeks, and this one also allowing it to actually go public. Typically, Russians will censor these types of attacks. They're not anymore, and we're going to get to that, where we're going to talk about the whole, Hexath, DHS, CISA, and Russia. That's the next story, so don't go anywhere. Something is happening here in terms of awareness and cyber attacks. So Beeline did confirm the attack to local Russian media, following reports from several outages, service trackers, and user complaints. The provider has more than 44 million subscribers in Russia. That's about a third of the population. Data from the Internet Monitoring Service Down Detector indicated that most Beeline users in Russia face difficulty accessing the company's mobile app, while some others reported website outages, notification failures, and internet disruption. Beeline stated in a comment to State News Media that its specialist had identified the issue, taken measures to stabilize the service. This appears to have been a DDoS attack, although no one's really claiming any sort of responsibility for the attack. Beeline was owned by VEON, a Dutch-based company that also owned Ukraine's Kyivstar. Following the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, VEON began divesting its Russian operations as part of the sanctions on Russia for the attack on Ukraine. We'll get to some of the news over the weekend, and I think Admiral Rogers talked about this yesterday also. Is there a change of posture with kind of the things going on with Russia? Well, the DoD Secretary Hegseth said, do not plan future Russian cyber operations for now. Halt the planning. He didn't say halt the operations. He said halt the planning. I think that's you got to read into that. CISO, for their end, said we are not changing any stances in detecting and disrupting Russian APTs, even as the directive pauses some offensive cyber operations against Russia amid some of the negotiations taking place now. The public clarification follows a report from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that has directed a temporary halt to cyber information operations against Moscow, a decision intended to keep negotiations on the Russia-Ukraine war on track. According to the Washington Post, the offensive operation pause is designed to prevent any cyber action from undermining ongoing dialogue aimed at resolving the conflict in the Ukraine. So two things could be true simultaneously. Putin is a very bad man, started the war with Ukraine, and is responsible for the death of over 1 million people between the Russian and the Ukrainian side. However, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Those two things can be true simultaneously. Something Admiral Rogers talked about yesterday that I think actually resonates and within the beeline of what you hear from National Security Walls and Secretary Rubio and many people in the administration is we have to give diplomacy a chance, and we've got to show we're serious because there's been steps by previous administrations to say one thing and do something completely different over time. So is that right or wrong? Again, two things can be true simultaneously. Putin can be trusted, but if you keep escalating, then you've got two major nuclear powers in an escalation. That's not good for anyone. I like life. I want life. I don't want to get nuked, and I don't want to nuke the Russians. I want people to live in peace, and I think most of the people in this community agree with that as well. So that's part of what's happening there, kind of reading between it. CISA not backing down, continuing to disrupt Russian operations and so forth is a positive step, even though DoD and NSA are pausing cyber operations. That just means pausing cyber operations. And again, and planning and cyber operations, they're still doing stuff on the other hand and collecting intel. So all of those still exist there. And I've been told that to be the case. So we'll move to Iran, where a massive botnet that compromised over 30,000 hacked security cameras and network video recorders is being used to launch DDoS attacks against telecom providers and gaming platforms, according to Nokia Deepfield and Greynoise. The botnet is being tracked as 11 bot is being used to launch brute force attacks against login systems, exploiting weak and default passwords on some IoT device. More than 60% of the 1,000 observed IP addresses have been traced to Iran, according to the campaign. Its size is exceptional among non-state actor botnets, making it one of the largest known DDoS botnets campaigns observed since the invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022, according to Jerome Meyer, a researcher at Nokia Deepfield. The intensity of the botnet has varied from a few hundred thousands to several 100 million packets per second. So we're seeing Iran step up their game there. And threat hunters are calling attention to a new highly targeted phishing campaign, singling out fewer than 5 entities in the UAE to deliver a previously undocumented Gulen backdoor known as Cizano. The malicious activity was directed against aviation and satellite communication organizations, according to Proofpoint, which detected the activity coming from 2024. They're tracking the emerging cluster under the moniker UNK Crafty Camel. Okay, Camel is attributed to the Arabian Peninsula, Proofpoint. I think I got to give you a lesson here. Persians actually, like while camels reflect that, camels are more associated with the Arabian Peninsula, and Iran's not in the Arabian Peninsula. It's on the other side. So just saying, like, give it a better name. Kittens. What happened to kittens? I thought the Iranians were kittens. A noteworthy aspect of the attack chain is the fact that the adversary took advantage of its access to a compromised email account belonging to an Indian electronics company, Indic Electronics, to send phishing messages. The entity is said to have been a trusted business relationship with the targets, primarily targeting the airlines and satellite areas in the UAE. So again, you're seeing kind of 5 different Golang payloads that are going there that establish contact, limit functionality. Susanna gets current directory or change working directory. Yangom to enumerate the contents of the current directory. Monday to download and launch an unknown next stage payload. Ryan to delete or remove a directory, and Luna to execute a shell command. Proofpoint noted that the Tradercraft demonstrated does not overlap with any other known threat group or any known threat actor or group for that. So it's either new or it's a new tactic. A complex phishing campaign is targeting SharePoint accounts with malicious documents aimed at getting users to compromise themselves by deploying a PowerShell command. The attack is a click fix style cyber attack campaign that ultimately aims to deploy the open source and powerful Havoc C2 framework to gain full control over targeted systems. Havoc, being a C2 framework, is akin to Cobalt Strike, Silver, and Windows 4.0 that attackers could use to gain control over targeted system. Being that it's open source and available on GitHub, it makes it easy for threat actors to customize and add anti-detection capabilities. FortiGuard Labs discovered the campaign, which leveraged an unusual tactic of disguising malicious C2 communication by using graph APIs inside of SharePoint. According to a blog post published yesterday, the threat actor hides each malware stage behind a SharePoint site and uses a modified version of Havoc Daemon in conjunction with the Microsoft Graph API to obscure C2 communications within trusted, well-known services. So from the onset of the campaign, again, going after SharePoint. And again, this goes into having full visibility into your Microsoft environment. If you're a Microsoft shop, that becomes your primary authority. You've got to have good control over your Microsoft Graph APIs. Those need to be monitored. They need to be observed. You've got to have kind of a change report and a data communication report in order to kind of establish your baseline. So that way anything off baseline is matched to a business process. Once it's matched to a business process, you're able to identify anomalies, and then you can send your security operations team or your threat hunters to go find out why does that anomaly exist and stop an attack before it gets really, really bad. So again, it's all about visibility, baseline, business process, and threat hunting there. The FTC, for their end here, as we wrap up this morning's show, are claiming a major victory for consumers after halting a deceptive phantom debt collection scheme that has misled and exploited individuals across the country. The legal action has led to a temporary restraining order issued by a federal court, stopping the illegal operation of the scam and freezing assets of its operations. The fraudulent scam operated under a variety of names like BlackRock Services, Blackstone Legal Group, Capital Legal Services, Quest Legal Group, and Viking Legal Services, causing millions of dollars in losses to consumers. At the center of the case are Ryan and Mitchell Evans, along with their network of affiliate companies, who are accused of running a widespread phantom debt collection operation, according to the FTC. The defendants' employees and affiliates sent deceptive letters, made harassing phone calls to consumers, claiming they own a debt. They were then fabricating debt linked to payday loans or other sources. The recipients were threatened with dire consequences if they didn't pay, forcing people to pay of their hard-earned money to these scammers. The calls and letters employed by the defendants in this phantom debt collection scheme went further by falsely claiming that consumers had been defrauding financial institutions and could face severe consequences. This is a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practice, according to the FTC, and now there's a lawsuit to stop the activity, and hopefully there'll be a criminal case brought against both of those owners and every employee that participated in that as well. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow 9 a.m. Eastern live here with all the latest and greatest updates. You can go to cyberhubpodcast.com. You can get a written summary of this version directly in your inbox shortly after the show airs. The show does re-air at 11 a.m. Eastern on our CyberHub Podcast LinkedIn page and a few other Reddit and Facebook pages and communities, so you can always check it out there. We also air at 11 a.m. on Rumble, so if you're on Rumble, you can go check it out there. Again, thank you all for tuning in this morning. Make sure to go and subscribe so you can get kind of the written version. It always helps kind of demystify everything we talk about on the show very, very quickly. And we'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, here with all the latest and greatest. Until then, have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.